The views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in the podcast belong solely to the hosts and not the host's past, present, or future employers. Hello everybody, welcome back. It's Brian for Breaking Down Security. We're about to do part 2 of our discussion with April Mardock, Jared Folkins, and Nathan McNulty on education security. When we recorded this, it was back before all of the craziness of a lot of the COVID-19 and pandemic stuff had happened, and lockdowns and schools hadn't been canceled yet. As of April 6th, 2020, which is today when I'm recording this audio, all of our schools have been pretty much shut down in the state of Washington, and the school year's over for on-campus learning. So we're having to shift to more of a distance learning, which obviously adds new and exciting threats and issues to the landscape for the education security folks that you will hear this week. So I'm going to go ahead and get this started. Just remember, the next time you hear about a breach of a school system, if they even had one half of the trials and tribulations that some of the topics that have been raised in the last couple of weeks, if they had those half of the issues that they've that have mentioned in the last couple of podcasts, then that they were it's par for the course, because there's a lot of organizations, a lot of smaller school systems out there that don't have the resources even that these three that we've interviewed did. So it's important to remember that. And so keep your distance, stay safe, stay healthy, take care of yourselves, and we'll talk to you again next week. So when you have state testing like that, do they come to you and go, okay, state testing's coming up, we're only going to use, Chrome 9 or something like that? And we're like, well, we've already upgraded to 10. Do you have to force downgrades? Is that even possible?
Nope, you can't.
Okay. So April, Jared, do any of you ever come with vendors and they're like, oh, we're using, this version because it's old and because that's the standard across other systems. And it's like, oh, we only use Windows 7 and, oh, well, we're already on 10
Flash.
And it won't work. Right. We use Flash. Oh God, we use Flash. Do you still have Flash, y'all's environment?
Java.
And there are, Flash and Java both in some older educational apps.
I just killed Flash and Java, the last one this year. So
God bless you, sir.
We're working on that. You're ahead of us.
God bless you, sir.
And to be fair, I will say vendors are a liability for us in a bunch of different ways.
Yeah. Yep. That was another way I was going to be heading here with regards to vendors. How do you do assessments of vendors, or is it, pretty much the vendor takes the superintendent of the schools to lunch and automatically you've got this brand new Flash app?
I wouldn't say it's quite that bad.
That's awesome.
Well, it happens in our world, in the InfoSec world, where it's like, this is crap. CISO gets taken to lunch, and then you've got, the Gartner approved whatever app. So I just wondered how it works for y'all.
Shiny things do sometimes come that way through executives, but most of the time we actually have a formal evaluation process now.
Nice.
Because we have to look at the privacy implications of what we bring on board. So we're looking at the EULA, we're looking at the privacy agreement, we're looking at how they manage the student data, that the data belongs to us, that we can demand that the data be deleted, and that they have processes and controls around it, because our vendors are in some ways how some education data is getting owned now.
Right.
Do you audit your vendors?
We do. Sometimes we have a formal audit requirement, and sometimes it's informal, but we are definitely holding our vendors to account legally through multiple every new contract that comes up, or any contract that comes up for renewal. We now make sure that all of the appropriate modules are added so that we have those controls.
And I think the key point there is putting it in the contract, right? Access for Learning, a4l.org, has some great frameworks. They manage a lot of the privacy stuff, and so we've partnered with them, as a lot of districts in the area do. So that's a really cool resource to kind of vet applications, and they can kind of get approved for privacy policies across the board for all districts if they agree to some of that stuff. So,
okay.
I think again, the way we're all talking here, it sharply drops off, right? People are struggling down with the smaller districts to just trying to grapple with any of this stuff. So we are blessed that we actually have some of these luxuries to actually accomplish this stuff.
Right.
That is true. There's, at least in Washington, we're trying to come up with a universal contract that has all of those bells and whistles in it, that once we've signed that contract, little districts can tack on and use it without having to go through the same level of work. It's been sort of pre-authorized in a way.
Now, you say you've been blessed, but really that's relative. You're in the grand scheme of things, you're not. You're still struggling, right, for resources and funding.
Yeah, absolutely. Sorry, I try to be an optimist, right? I try to say that I could look at all the problems that we have and say that I'm not going to try to do anything about it, or I can say, hey, these are the good things I got going for us, and I'll operate from that perspective. But you're absolutely right. We are vastly under-resourced, like April was saying.
Yeah, one of the other interesting things in education, you get these teachers who like spin off their own education app, right? Because it was something that they wanted to have available when they were teaching. Well, your CASB doesn't catch those. CASBs are designed for enterprise, right? So I'm sitting there watching all the applications people are using, and we have absolutely zero insight into some of these education applications that they're using because there's like 300 users of it, and nobody's ever classified it before.
Yeah. So we've discussed the understaffing. Do you ever do anything like retainers? So, hopefully y'all don't get hacked or breached or anything like that, but do you have IR services on retainer? Do you have a larger org that you can go to? Maybe like UW University may have an incident response team or something. University of Oregon, maybe the Beavers have something. I mean, how do y'all handle things that may be beyond your ken, or you may not have the staffing for, like IR and things like that?
Well, I certainly hope every district does have an incident response plan and have done the table talk and practice with it, no matter how big or small they are. But yes, we do contract out, and it's actually a very inexpensive contract. I've leveraged LMG Security to do sort of a pre-assessment. We exchange information. They get our network map. We do sort of that big conversation about our strengths and weaknesses so that when something does happen, they can step in and they're already kind of ready to run.
Okay. Nathan, how about yourself?
Yeah, so we've had security audits done, a couple of them now, over the last 5 years. So there's been 2. They'll do the internal penetration test as well as part of that, kind of going over all the stuff where we're lacking. So we kind of shore some stuff up there, but we rely on our cyber insurance to actually provide the incident response team. It's written into the cyber insurance contract. And I think a lot of school districts are that way, not knowing who to partner with, or a lot of times the cyber insurance company actually has their preferred vendor that they work with for IR. And so if a breach were to happen, they'd be coming in anyway, and our existing contract probably wouldn't matter. So, yeah.
I guess that's a double-edged sword there. One, you don't know who you're going to end up with, or if they're any good. If your insurance company just decides that, they get a nice letter from this company's CEO saying the attack was sophisticated, and then you don't have to pay or something like that. It would be hard, I think, for insurance, because I've started seeing where cyber insurance isn't paying because due diligence. They can say, well, you haven't done your due diligence. It must be hard to kind of, prove that in some cases, I would imagine.
Yeah, we've also seen some districts not understand what cyber insurance actually covers. So an incident happens and suddenly they're spending $100,000 a year for the next 5 years on an EDR platform and investing in all these other solutions that they don't have budget for, they didn't expect, but they won't get their cyber insurance money unless, they go and buy those products.
Goodness.
Yeah, I will say we're in a similar bind in that, or you could call it an advantage too. We have cyber insurance, and we have to do what the cyber insurance tells us to do, or they won't pay the coverage for whatever it is we need to do to mitigate.
Jared, is that similar?
Yeah, I mean, I know that we've got our incident response plan that we run through. I know the specifics of that, and offsite stuff and different things. I also know that we're really good at testing our backups. That's one thing that I think I'm really proud of our group for, is that we've got it really dialed in there to where we've got the 3-2-1 stuff going on, so that we know that there are on-site and their off-site backups type of thing is working for us. But I think an intriguing thing that we've seen recently in our group, speaking to this, is that there's still there's a lot of confusion. But one of the pieces that I'm seeing is folks think that if they check the boxes of some compliance, right, for cyber insurance, that's getting misevaluated and attributed to we're secure. And that's a really dangerous thing that we're trying to dispel, is that compliance is great and you got to do it for cyber insurance, but like you could probably still be totally open to a ransomware attack if you're not thinking about how your controls are living things and your systems are living things, and you're supposed to patch them and test them and scan them and hack yourself type of stuff.
So oh, sorry, go ahead, April.
Oh, I just wanted to follow up with that and say he's absolutely right. We consider it something of, it's a risk. You need to evaluate your risk and rank your risk and spend your limited resources on those things you consider most critical. I call it the worry factor, where you're basically taking the probability of it happening against the impact it would create for your district. And you take those things that rank the highest in that, and that's what you spend your dollars on. The compliance checklist is great to make sure you haven't skipped anything or missed anything major, but you're not really going to solve the problem until you actually do that evaluation.
Understood. So the next thought I had was, well, people are like, well, I don't have any idea what kind of audits you go through. I know that folks who do PCI or ISO audits or SOC audits, those are globally recognized. Do you have to deal with, state and federal type audits, or I can't imagine there's an international version of whatever the educational systems deal with PCI. Nathan, what kind of audits do you go through, or what kind of compliance, checkboxy things do you have to go through?
Yeah, we have no compliance other than say like FERPA or CIPA or COPPA or some of these like child protection stuff that has to do with how we handle their data. We do have some HIPAA data. But we don't actually have any compliance we have to meet. Now, like I know April's PCI compliance, whereas we've kind of farmed that out. But yeah, we don't have to follow anything. So we try to align ourselves with like NIST cybersecurity framework and working on getting everything shored up for like a NIST 800-171 type level, right? And on our journey towards maybe something more in line with the 53.
I see. April, what you have to deal with PCI audits?
I don't have to do a PCI audit. We are basically the first level, merchant level, that has to report. So we did a PCI review, proved that we isolated the network, but we encrypt the credit card scanner. So it's scanned from the moment it touches the scanner to when it goes to the vendor. We're just man in the middle passing the traffic.
I see.
We also train our users about making sure that they protect the cards and they protect the equipment from tampering and all of that kind of stuff. So yeah, we have some minimal PCI requirements in that space. And then we file that. But in reality, where we run into audits is with the state. And the state will come in and they're actually starting to ask some really good questions about things like backup processes, about things like separation of duties, whether our domain admins have to MFA. They're asking some really sharp questions, and I think that's going to become a better and better place to make sure that schools have some guidance around what should happen.
Jared,
have you?
Go ahead.
Oh, yeah. What's up? Yeah, I mean, so our lunch system is basically the one that we kind of get that PCI stuff on. You find there's certain systems that creep into every org that all of a sudden you have to do compliance work on. But as far as like Nathan's saying, it's mainly the child protection stuff that we have to deal with, that we're happy to take on to protect the kids. But it's a different world for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'd say Washington's unique there. I was going to ask Jared, have you seen that from Oregon at all? Because I certainly have not heard anything like that.
No, not at all. No,
Like, I think Texas is really kicking butt. They do some really great stuff down there as far as setting policy and kind of communicating that out with their schools. But yeah, I haven't seen anything like that from Oregon yet.
Wow. Okay. So not every state might be a little different in terms of what they
totally.
do.
It is different. Yep.
Okay. All right, so you've got on average, how many vendors do each of you have to deal with? And when they come in with a new system, do you always ask for an on-prem solution or an in-the-cloud solution? Or does it matter based on certain factors like data being stored? I'll start with Jared this time.
I think we're more apt to like the on-prem stuff, just because I don't know, there's something about it too where when you have to wear many hats, right? Like you end up, so if I have to, build every website that we've got, and then I got to go and, rebuild our ERP stack, right? And then I've got to go and do, install Wireshark and dump some PCAP files. Like when you're wearing so many hats, the on-prem stuff is nice because the cloud, you don't know what visibility you're getting. So it just depends there. But there are good cloud vendors that I think are in that space. The one that's been a force multiplier for us, I'm blanking on it, is the authentication. Nathan, you know what I'm talking about, or April?
You're talking about Clever?
Yep. So Clever has been a huge boon for us, is consolidating the authentication from many different vendors' cloud apps. So Clever will just do the authentication. You can flip a switch basically, and all of a sudden you've got multi-factor authentication if you want. You've got single sign-on if you want. It's really nice. So that would be my answer. Just depends.
Okay.
Yeah, and the big key with Clever is that they do rostering, is what it's called. So basically provisioning classrooms, associating the teacher to that classroom for a lot of platforms, which is very complicated to set up. And every vendor does it differently. So Clever kind of takes the work out of doing that yourselves, and they do it on scale, and then school districts just sign up and go.
Okay. April, what? Obviously, you're in a tech-heavy, area of the country, even more so than Beaverton and Bend. But do you opt for more cloud-based stuff, or are you still doing the on-prem stuff?
It entirely depends on the product stack. Obviously, for web services, we're moving that to the cloud. For some of our communication tools like School Messenger, that's in the cloud, where we're trying to do like mass contacts for parents. We still keep our HR system and our student systems on site, partly because we so heavily customize our systems, and we have so many systems that we write custom interfaces for to move data back and forth and to do custom forms or custom setups. We're large enough. I mean, I think we have 18 different unions. And so we customize our payroll for those 18 different unions. So there's sometimes when you go with a cloud, or more specifically a software as a service approach, you kind of have to go with the least common denominator, and you don't get the flexibility you need. And so one of the things that we struggle with is finding that appropriate balance. I will say that we have a lot of cloud apps, and we also have a lot of on-site apps. It just entirely depends on the vendor and the need.
Very interesting. Yeah. So with all that customization, do you ever get to a point where the vendor's like, do you get to push those kinds of changes back, or are you required, the more complex the change, to maintain it yourself? Because I would imagine at some point it's like, well, we'd like to take it to the next degree, but we can't. We've customized it out as far as we can. We can't go any further. So do you ever have to reach back to the vendor and go, look, you need to, we need X to be able to do this? And how quickly are these, like Clever, for instance, website doesn't look awful, but it doesn't, it's an SPA, it's a single page app looking thing. But how quick are they to make changes? Is it depending on how big you are, or how much money you've spent, or what's it look like?
Clever charges the vendors on the other side. The school districts actually don't pay for it at all.
I'll be damned.
I will say that Clever is in the middle, and it is really up to the expertise level of each of the applications that they connect to. So we have some stuff that we just basically flip a switch to Nathan's description, and voila, we have single sign-on, and we have rosters, and everybody can log into their typing program, and life is wonderful. We have other vendors that are through Clever that really don't seem to quite have it together yet, and that seems to take months to work out. Which fields they're going to use, and whether we have to give them a student ID, which we would prefer not to, or whether we have to give them from a data privacy point of view, we're trying to provide less and less information to the vendors, as little as possible, and still keep the product operational, because we'd rather they not have what they don't need.
Right. Nathan?
Yeah, so I'd say we had probably in the thousands of vendors just a few years ago. It's been slowly whittling down as we've kind of locked down on the privacy aspect of it. That's ruled a lot out because they just wouldn't sign privacy agreements. And then we also put into our contract language that like single sign-on was a requirement. So whether they support SAML OAuth or Clever, which Clever can handle both of those, but it also does kind of a password database where it passes the credentials through for the end user, similar to like Azure App Proxy or something if you're doing basic auth or whatever. Mm-hmm. So yeah, anyway, we have really whittled a lot of that down, but we still have hundreds of vendors that we have to deal with. Majority of it we keep on premise because we have better control and visibility there. And then for like vendor management accounts and all that kind of stuff, we only have a handful where there's an actual vendor account. Those are disabled, randomized passwords enabled only when they need it for the period of time they need it, and we disable it again.
Okay. Jared,
why would you not sign a privacy agreement if it means, having a customer?
Good God.
Oh yeah, there's a lot of
well, remember, for free programs, we're the ones that are on the menu. They're selling our data. If we tell them they can't sell our data, the model for them making money goes away.
It's understandable. Yeah, I guess I was like, man, why would you not? Yeah. So Mr. Betcher, good job thinking about that. So, So one of the other reasons we wanted to have the show was, we hear a lot of people like, oh, why don't you just buy this? And we've answered a lot of those questions. It's kind of inverse here where it's like the younger users tend to be a bit more technology savvy than the people in authority. I'm not trying to disparage anybody, but there's been stories online about students changing grades using a teacher's password because the teacher left the password in their drawer in their desk, or they've got 15 accounts and it's all the same password. How do you handle education of the teachers themselves? I mean, because they're educators themselves, and they want to get their job done, and they want to go home, and they want to do everything. What kind of technology are you using to protect the sanctity of the grades, or to make sure that the teacher's laptop on their desk is not somebody's not little Billy's not going to run through while the teacher's outside doing whatever and change the grades? Is there policies in place to prevent against that, or all of a sudden the teacher's starting to make major changes? How are you keeping integrity of data with regards to the teacher environment? I'll start with Jared this time.
That's a really tough question. We've done a pretty good job now because all of our services that don't need to hang out on the public internet, although they have a public portal, we've pulled inside our own network, right? And then we recently just turned on VPN for our staff too, right? So when they go home and they open their laptop, they're still on our infrastructure. And so our public footprint gets a little smaller in that regard. But it's still quite a challenge. I don't know if I answered that good enough for you, but that's kind of how we're handling it.
Oh, I was just thinking along the lines of, are you making teachers use things like password lockers or clean desk environment where they're not allowed to like write down passwords, or it's have to use 1Pass, or team password lockers or something like that?
No. Unfortunately, that's for us. It's a high friction point still. The way I pitch handling that, right, is that so say we've got this attack vector where a teacher's email account gets owned, and then that attacker takes on the persona of the teacher to email the business office to try to get the direct deposit information changed remotely so that they can steal a paycheck, right?
Right.
My approach there is more about saying, let's show the teachers how, and our users how security, empowering them to be more secure, and they can take these skills home, but it also helps us at work. And so for now, for us, we've just started those conversations with a lot of our staff. we've done the technical low hanging things like SSO and stuff, but the multi-factor, right? We're trying to get the inertia to turn that on, and that's a huge friction point. We've seen in other districts where unions come to the plate, and that's been a problem, right? The unions will say, I don't know if MFA flies for us. So there's a ton of challenges there, and I think it's more about a partnership with them than anything. It's the easiest way I can put it.
Wow. Nathan, what have you seen at your environment?
Yeah, similar. The difficulty with like grading, for example, the auditing of the applications really isn't that great to begin with. So you kind of you can't rely just on the technology aspect of it, right? So we have the checks and balances of, hey, you have it all on paper and you're validating again. So same as somebody wants to put in for a bank account change, like we require that on a completely different process than just like submitting it via digital, because we just can't trust that process. So same thing goes for grades. And a lot of our applications just don't have any kind of auditing natively built in, and we don't have a good way to like bolt that in there. So that becomes complex too.
Sure. April, you must have stories, dozens and dozens of stories about this.
Sure, I can share one of them. It's a little bit older now, well, or two actually. In one case, I had a kid attach a physical keylogger to the back of the machine and wait to collect the teacher's password, a little black device that nobody noticed, and then pick that back up. And we'd locked the grades so they could only be changed from teacher machines. But what he did was he was in driver's ed, and the driver's ed teacher was out and about. He changed the grades from the driver's ed computer teacher's computer while they were out doing the driving stuff. That was several years ago now. We don't have that currently. The other thing that we do, and this is perhaps, I don't know how to explain it other than to just say it. We make the teachers, we don't allow you to save any passwords anywhere. You can't save it in the browser, so the kiddos can't walk up behind a teacher and get into a system easily. We try to make sure that the grades can only be altered from a district teacher computer. And so the student has to basically get physical access for that to work. And we have never exposed grading from the outside without two-factor. And I've been fortunate that our union worked with us and was on our team and helped us come up with a method to deploy two-factor authentication. So it's a lot harder for a kiddo to pretend to be a teacher with just a username and a password.
Wow. Yeah, I don't know of a lot of InfoSec folks that have to deal with, well, not deal with, but they, have to coordinate their actions with the teachers unions or what have you. So,
they're big. Yeah. They're wonderful partners. I want to encourage everyone to loop them in early in the process when you're trying to make those kind of changes. And they'll be collaborative and give you ideas on, how to best communicate it and what avenues might make some sense, fairs or opportunities to interact, as well as giving the specific kinds of concerns they have where MFA it will work for most folks, but we do have exception processes. And if you do it right, that exception is actually approved by the union leadership, and they're the ones who make the decision about whether someone gets an exception or not.
Right. Nathan, go ahead.
Not every district does it that way, and not every union is as
cooperative.
Cooperative, yeah, that's a great word for it. One of the other difficulties that we run into is if it's a contract year, they're looking for any kind of opportunities they can use as a bargaining chip as well, to get better pay or better benefits or whatever that might be. And so that's another thing that we run against when we're trying to do things like enabling MFA. Oh, you're making staff use their own devices. Oh, well, it's extra time that you're costing them. Some of those things are common pushbacks that we get.
Oh, wow. So security as a hurdle in this case is a bargaining chip. Interesting. Jared, what's been your experience with those with unions or with dealing with this complex environment?
Yeah, I think to April's point, starting conversations early is ideal. I was just realizing though how long some of these relationships are, right, and how highly political they are. And so it definitely is an incredibly unique challenge because you can work with somebody in the union who you've got a great relationship with. Again, it's all about relationships and the ship starts sailing. But then you might have two stakeholders who have butted heads in the past, and you've got a little bit of an issue there. So
right. Okay. Let me see what else. So I'm hearing people out there, on the podcast, listening to this and going, well, what is, if you had an unlimited budget, what would be the first thing that one of you or each of you would invest in or do to improve your situation? I'll start with April first.
No fair.
Yeah.
Seriously.
If I had a magic wand, I'd get more staff. I'd get a real sim. And I'd probably, there's so many layers to this to solve, and some of it can't be solved with money. Some of it, to everybody else's point, is an investment in relationships and time. Some of this is about our culture and changing the way we approach problems. Because in some ways it's, don't touch the classroom. You can't fix that with dollars. So part of it is to find a way to, I hate to say it, but there needs to be some external controls. And I don't mean a compliance checklist, but I think we need to be able to make it okay to do things like force MFA. And what does that look like? I don't know. It probably means some guidance from the state. It probably means some directives. It probably means some policy changes. And then it also means having the right tools and resources to accomplish the task, which means we need more people and we need more tools. And we need some tools to be automated enough and tuned well enough that it doesn't require a large number of people to support them.
Okay. Nathan?
Yeah, I definitely second the staffing aspect of it. We don't have enough people to actually dial all the controls that we know that we have, that we need to be doing. I don't know if the paid solutions would, they out of the box, right? Splunk has a lot more than Graylog. So there's definitely some things that would be helpful there. But yeah, just being able to hire that expertise, I think, would go a long way. And that would also kind of bleed out into culture, I think. It's really hard as just one person to kind of influence the culture of an IT department in general, much less the entire populace of like 6,000 plus staff. Being able to get that awareness out there is really, really difficult.
Okay. Jared over there in very affluent Bend, Oregon.
Yeah. It's FTE is the easy one, right?
Right.
If I'm going to go kind of a little, philosophical, I think Nathan and I and April, we talk a lot about technical debt, how we've stacked this stuff up for years and years. So if I had a magic wand, I would just be able to say, if this stack is like 20, older than 10 years old, boom, like this is now running something elegant and modern. And the most modern thing for me is these ideas, the force multipliers, right? So auto updating, auto patching, when systems do that for me, right, that scales me. And that really stretches my dollar. When I have to just handhold these systems day in and day out to keep them running because of whatever we're going through, that really slows things down, as well as it just means that eventually things don't get patched. A lot of my thoughts go to when critical people leave who are passionate about these topics, who are on top of it because they're doing a remarkable job, because they want to go above and beyond. When they're gone, how do you replace like not only just that FTE body, but like the passion who's like gonna actually patch stuff and like keep up to date on stuff? So I don't know. That magic wand for me would be remove technical debt. Here. Please just make it go away.
Right. Okay. All right, so we've mentioned a few times, April, Nathan, Jared, you talk quite a bit. One of the questions that was put in our show notes here was how did y'all meet?
Yeah, so I was thinking just from a community building, for your podcast, you've got you folks have got your Slack and stuff. The story is kind of intriguing because I found some vulnerabilities in a vendor's piece of software, right? And going through and reporting those vulnerabilities, we kind of started this grassroots thing, which we turned into a nonprofit. And I met Nathan through that. And one of the stories I like to share about Nathan is, when I approached him saying, hey, you should do this, man. His kind of response was like, well, I don't think I'm good enough. And I think that maybe I'll just do this until you find someone better. And I think, hand to God, like there's not been a single person better for what he's doing. And then as far as April, how we met and hooked up with April was we were all at a conference and somebody was kind of going off on their users about wishing that they could be punitive, right? I wish I could just hammer my user when they're so stupid. And my trigger finger was like twitching, like I'm going to raise my hand and embarrass myself because I really have a big mouth when it comes to stuff like that. I can't stand that attitude. And before I could, I saw this hand raise up from this gal way across the room. And she kind of stood up and she just elegantly said, well, up at our district, we try to partner and we do things in this way with our users. And we find that when our users make a couple mistakes, we automatically migrate them to the MFA group. We don't just bring the ban hammer down. And when we got done with that, I remember walking up to that talk, after talk was over, I walked up to April and I don't know if you remember this, April. I said, excuse me. And April looked right at me and she said, oh, and she was talking to this guy and she goes, do you want to talk to him? And I remember thinking, man, do I look like a jerk? Like what? I want, and so what I said to her was like, no, I want to talk to you. I want you to know that how you spoke, how you presented yourself and how you care about people is remarkable. And so that's kind of how we started hooking up and realizing that we're kind of this little micro team who wants to help people as well as we do actively help people. But we all really align on some of those core principles.
Okay. So that brings me to the OPSEC EDU bit here. I put a link in the show notes to this. It's y'all have built a security community. It looks like you're using Slack, which is great. Do they give you the educational discount or are you using a free Slack on that?
No, so I was going to just tell you, I know I think Nathan mentioned that you were doing like a nonprofit stuff.
Yeah.
And so if you ever want to, I don't know if you're doing this as well, but I've like gone through everything you can find to figure out what you can get for free as a nonprofit. So with a nonprofit, you can get 250 pro accounts free on Slack. You can sign up for Azure and get a grant for $3,000 for Azure credits so that could host your podcast or your website and stuff. But that's kind of going through that has been a definite learning opportunity.
Now is that
is
that 200? Sure. Is that 200 accounts that are active or 200 accounts total?
Yeah. So there you go. So how Slack does their little calc. And so if you look at the calculation, you might only have say 76 users who are cumulatively active at the moment. So that's all you're licensed. Yeah. So I've kind of done the math and I thought, well, you know what, you probably could have 1,000 or 1,200 users if, a chunk of them are not active at any given time. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we're roughly about 450 to 500 users per day active.
That's awesome.
So we're kind of a victim of our own popularity in many cases. I think most of them lurk, which is okay. We would like more community involvement, but it sounds like y'all are doing some great stuff with the Slack. And are you treating it like what do they call those? The ISACs, where information sharing? Are you treating it with that kind of format, or is it a little looser? Is it kind of an open forum kind of thing? Hey, I've noticed this. I work for it's very, very small, even smaller than Nathan's school district, but it's like, I found this thing. Is this really something that's a problem? Are you using it as a knowledge sharing tool? Hey, I want to be able to push these things out. How are you teaching, or how are you using this community? Nathan?
Yeah, I think all of the above is what we're seeing.
Okay.
Sometimes you'll have something that's active. Somebody is saying, April's definitely a leader there, saying this is the attack I'm currently seeing, and people kind of say, oh, let me go to my firewall, let's go and look, and so you kind of have this kind of core hub just branch out and come back and say, well, this is what I'm seeing, and kind of what April is. Oh, go ahead.
We're also leveraging how-tos, because as we work with free and simple, we're trying to come up with methods that'll work for all districts, big and small. Okay. And we're documenting those how-tos and putting them in the blog space, so that all of us, as we develop these things, we can leverage each other's work rather than trying to do it all, spending the taxpayers' dollars 5,500 times over.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a lot of stuff that doesn't translate quite perfectly from enterprise over into education space. And a lot of them aren't familiar with, if I'm going to go look at some resources on Mimikatz, they don't really know what they're looking for. So we try to provide a lot of that conversation there and kind of educating people, teaching them what they don't know. But back to the lurkers conversation, we actually have a lot of lurkers on there, which is just awesome that they're actually learning. And
Right.
so for the BDS podcast, Slack, it's just awesome that they're in there and they're learning, and they may not be comfortable contributing yet, but
Sure.
that'll come,
Yeah,
That's
no,
great.
100%. Sometimes you just may need, a little warning to know, it may be one day you'll have a chance to communicate back, and you've, sorry, first time poster, long time lurker, I've noticed this, and you may end up saving the day by finding something that somebody else didn't see or something like that. So completely understand that. So I was looking because one of the things I wanted to do this year was to speak at a non-InfoSec type conference, and I've done that. As long as it's not going to be canceled, I'm expecting to speak at on a panel at a wireless conference, which is I would consider non-InfoSec. There must be conferences for education and folks in potentially security in education. Can you tell us if anything like that exists, or do you know if anything exists like that, Jared?
I mean, the only conference I've seen recently was ACPE, which is just a regional technology conference for educators. And this year it's security, which is great, is the topic, but it's not, there's no B-sides, right? There's no, there's nothing like that to where you can kind of dig in. And in that regard, I don't know if there needs to be. I'm not entirely sure. I know that when Nathan and I went to B-sides in Portland, we had a bunch of students show up, right? We had a teacher show up, and we ate lunch with a teacher and stuff. So there is some of that stuff that, my opinion is, we need to get some of the educators into security. Mm-hmm. But if you're in security, I guess my hope, if you're hearing this, is that if you have a passion for students, or if you just want to get involved, I can tell you many different stories. There's not enough time here about how we've been blessed, right? I know Marcus, Carey, and Jen asking me to do the red team book was great. I know April and Nathan get an opportunity for the blue team book has been huge. But nice. If you're in security, we need folks to actually come to us and like speak and help and be a voice to what they're seeing, because we're desperate for it. We really are. We need that involvement.
Okay. Well, what would some of that, what would that look like? Can I just call you up and go, hey, I want to come and speak to your school? It's not like career day or anything like that, but I mean, what would somebody like myself, if I wanted to come and speak, what kind of format would that be? Would I be doing a teacher in service or something like that?
Yeah, so we did a bring your ethical hacker to school day. We used Slack to set it all up. Okay. We found classrooms all over the world. Our farthest being April did the farthest, which was awesome, in Australia, a girls' school.
Wow,
badass! It was sweet. But we had people in the security community, coming to the classrooms and saying, "This is what I do for a living," and this is like, it was so awesome, because not only were people saying, "Hey, like." Here's some cool stories I've got. They're security stories, but like the fear lessened from like maybe the teachers or the principals or the superintendents. We started a dialogue of this group of quote unquote hackers, these people who are professional information security folks. They do this for a living. This doesn't have to be something you're scared about. And there is a need. There are groups of kids who are desperate for, they're great at this stuff, and they're just looking for an outlet, somebody to click with, somebody to listen to who understands them.
Yeah.
Okay.
And I have a couple of really good examples. We're fortunate to have Nike and Intel in our area. And so I've been able to communicate with people from their security teams. And that's been hugely helpful when I was starting vulnerability management program. Like, what do I look for? I don't want to just go out and buy Nessus because I just recognize the name Nessus. I want to know, like, what am I actually getting into and what's going to serve me long term? And so I think, it would be great if they were proactively like kind of reaching out. Hey, just, I'm always here if you guys have any questions or something like that. But it was nice that I was actually able to find those resources and they were willing to meet with me.
Awesome. April, thank you for giving me the bad news privately about, travel being discouraged or expensive. I actually found a security conference while I was sitting here looking for K-12 educators called the K-12 Cybersecurity Conference in St. Louis in December 7th and 8th, 2020. So that's interesting. That
is interesting.
Yeah. So they have a whole Twitter hashtag.
Unfortunately, out-of-state travel is expensive and somewhat discouraged. There are sometimes special cases, although right now with COVID-19, that's probably even less likely. They've canceled all student field trips as well as all staff travel in that context. That said, if you're looking for a conference, that ACPE that was mentioned earlier will be in the Portland area in May.
Okay.
They may be sold out already. I hope not. But it's all about security, and I think we're going to have a chance to have some really solid conversations with our peers and talk about best practices and share all kinds of content. So if you can get in on that, I strongly encourage it.
Do you have a link to that?
I will send it to you.
Sweet. One of the things I found out about non-InfoSec conferences is they don't often do CFPs or anything like that. It's like the talks are very curated. The only reason I'm doing this wireless conference was because I basically asked the organizer straight up, how does somebody go and speak at your conference? Do you have to send a very large check and get involved? And she's like, no, you have a podcast and are in a nonprofit. We'll let you come and speak for free. And I was like, oh, so if I didn't have a podcast, if I didn't have a nonprofit, 40 or 501c3 or whatever, you wouldn't have even given me a sniff. And she didn't have an answer to that one, but I would assume that you have to have some kind of being, either an educational nonprofit or a media. Well, she called it media, so podcasts, we're media. So sorry. We're media. I just find it interesting how we have to navigate these non-InfoSec conferences to get our security message out there. So, cool. I would love to check out the ACPE thing down in Portland. I think that'd be fantastic.
Are they still, or Nathan, receiving calls for papers? I thought that was kind of coming up soon. I don't know.
I think they're doing the final. They're having a board meeting and deciding who's speaking here the first couple weeks of March. So we're all supposed to get notice of the speakers and the workshop sessions that are available.
Fantastic.
Cool.
I know there's some pretty amazing workshops that are already there. And I'm hoping it'll raise awareness because the folks who go to that are not just K-12 folks like us, but more senior management. So maybe we can
that's great.
Help them see the big picture too.
Yeah, that'd be great. Yeah,
a lot of CIOs.
Oh, very nice. Okay. Yeah, I'm sure with the amount of, there it is, acpenw.sked.com. Okay, I'll put that in the show notes as well. I would imagine with ransomware only going to get worse, and that it would be helpful for them to get an idea of what they can do to help their security and IT folks get better at, reducing the chances of needing to dip into that cyber insurance. So, cool.
I know Nathan and we did a talk last year, which it wasn't even security based, but it was all about trying to advocate for contractually finding the language to make sure that your vendors will be held responsible, if they're, having insecure software and stuff. So I would imagine with ACPE going forward, they're going to probably have some resources towards security, even after this kind of banner year of security for them.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah. Oh, wow. You got cool. Mr. Betcher, do you have any questions or anything? I mean, we're super over, but I learned quite a bit just about how school systems are, they got problems, but they got solutions too. You're muted, Mr. Betcher. You're muted, Mr. Betcher. Oops.
Try to be courteous.
Sorry, I was going to unmute you myself, but Go ahead, sir.
It kind of reminds me of how Marcus was on a few weeks ago, and he said after he became a filthy vendor and was going out to all these companies and trying to sell his wares, that he didn't realize how bad it was out there. And this is another indication now, through no fault of their own, it is bad out there, especially for schools, and they're struggling to get the security infrastructure built up and the staffing that they need. So yeah, it is a huge challenge.
Yeah. So for Nathan, April, and Jared, I got one last question. If somebody wanted to, I'm not saying like join as FTEs, but let's say they're in computer security or they're getting a degree in their university or they want to build up their resume. Are there avenues that they could pursue with you or with other school systems to perhaps help out in some way? Or are you hamstrung by certain employment practices that would require them to be like fully employed with the organization? I'll start with Nathan.
Yeah, I'd say it's a little bit of both. We could definitely talk amongst ourselves about maybe a separate Slack channel for guests where we bring people in and just kind of have those conversations, get to know them, that kind of thing. And then just making yourself available, I think, is the biggest one, where we can reach out and ask those questions when they come up and we're not sure, what's the right direction to go on this. I like just hopping on the BDS podcast Slack as well and just being able to toss those questions out, or the InfoSec Twitter. But I think especially in your hometown, like areas where you have influence and you want, your affect stuff in your kid's school district, trying to reach out to the administration, IT, find out who you can talk to and just make sure that they know who you are, what your skill set is, and what you'd be willing to help out with. And I think, I would jump on that if I got that email.
Okay. Sounds good. April.
So we, obviously anyone who works with our kids in our schools goes through background check process.
Right.
And
Okay.
that's fingerprinting, that's full state patrol checks and all of that sort of thing.
That's understandable.
So it is a bit onus to get it plugged in, but we definitely appreciate our volunteers. There's a couple places where they're especially valuable. One is in cyber safety, both with PTAs and talking to parents, and in talking to classes, especially at the middle school and the high school level. That whole cyber safety education, helping kids feel like they can talk about issues in a safe place, raise concerns, learn from each other and learn from you. There's even, to some degree, there's some program material around that. But we're always looking for folks to help in that space. But within, you kind of have to follow the program.
Sure.
Because there's certain topics that have to be covered. And so once you complete the background check, and then we can put you in front of PTAs, or we can put you in front of high school and middle school classrooms and have you help walk through some of that content if that's something you want to help with.
Okay. Sounds great. Okay. Jared, how about you?
Yeah, I mean, I don't see it as a huge opportunity in Ben Lapine specifically. But I was going to throw out there that kind of what you were talking about. One thing that I kind of am passionate about too is that I see a lot of folks struggling to break into information security. And I think that a lot of folks could get that first help desk job or could get that first sysadmin job or analyst job in K-12. And I know, April, don't you have a couple stories of folks that have worked for you that have gotten their CISP and kind of moved on? Is that true? Or am I misremembering?
Oh, yeah. I've trained up a couple CISSPs. And one of them has already sprouted wings and flown away. But I'm working on training up a few more. I've actually got one still. My senior engineer is a CISSP now also, and I'm working on number 3 actually.
That's awesome.
Oh, very nice. Okay. All right. So that if you're trying to break into InfoSec, that might be a good opportunity for you if you're looking for that. Does most school systems advertise that stuff, or do they still have the same problem with job descriptions where it's like they need everything under the sun because they really do need everything under the sun and they want to try to put it into one person?
I'm afraid the biggest challenge we have is that we can't pay what private can. Most of the folks who sprout wings and fly away from me can land a job that pays 1.5 times what they made here, or maybe even twice.
Okay. That's fair. So you got to kind of like your job, and you can't be motivated by
Yeah,
pay.
the intangibles of, there are big intangibles for sure, right? You all mentioned that we all have kids, right? And so if, for me taking the school district job, a big piece was my kids were all little. I was working for the ISP here in Bend before that. And when I went to put my daughter down, and she was saying, "Hey, she's 2." At the time was 2. Now she's 10, but she was 2, and she's saying, "Hey, I don't want you. I want mom." I'm like, okay, I guess I'm going to carve up my lifestyle here to make sure that she wants dad putting her to bed. So there's a lot of intangibles, I think, that go into it. But you're absolutely right, and April's right. The pay's not going to be anywhere close to the private sector.
Okay.
At least for us, and every district's different, but our medical coverage is outstanding. So like if you have health complications or things where, your premiums would be higher for some companies, like it does somewhat balance out as far as the pay goes. And then the amount of time that we get off as well is oftentimes nice. Like at least for our district, we get paid for spring break and Christmas break as well.
Nice.
On top of it. Yeah. Right. So it just depends on the district as far as what the benefits look like. And as far as advertising, we do it poorly. Just pretty much across the board. The job descriptions aren't great, but it's still worth applying, having conversations, and see where it goes.
Cool. Okay. Mr. Betcher, any last questions?
Nope.
Cool. All right. So I'll start with Nathan. How would people get a hold of you if they're interested in maybe helping out at your organization, or if they wanted to discuss more with you about, some of the conferences or anything that we brought up today?
Yeah, probably the best way is going to be on Twitter. It's just Nathan McNulty.
Okay. All right. April, how about you?
For me, it's probably LinkedIn, April Mardock, and you can message me there, or you can also do a DM in Twitter.
Okay, fantastic. Jared, how about you?
Yeah, the easiest way is just jaredfolkins.com, and every handle I've got links off that.
Fantastic. All right. Cool. Mr. Betcher, tell us a little bit about what you do for a living and how it might help out folks.
Yeah, I was just working on today, PE-Civ in LogMD. We're going to release that with the free version coming up. So you can look for injection, and you can also automate that. So put that into your SIM or whatever to hunt for those malicious processes. So
Awesome.
That's a good thing. Check it out. The website is log-md.com.
Fantastic. And how would people find you on Twitter?
@BetcherPwned, my last name, and PWNED.
Nice. Okay. And you're sometimes on the Brakesec Slack, but sometimes not. Sometimes. Mostly not, but it is what it is. He's busy. He's a busy guy. He runs, very big corporation as his day job. So it's cool. Or he helps, keep them protected from bad guys and stuff. So it's a full-time job. So, Miss Berlin does a plethora of things. She's on the, created Hackers Mental Health. So you can find them on Twitter at Hackers Health. You can find her on Twitter at InfoSystir, INFOSYSTIR. She's also running some classes, the InfoSec Detect and Defend, I think is what it's called. We can't use the acronym for that because we'll probably get sued by some gaming corporation. But she does workshops at various conferences. NolaCon, I think, was coming up. By the time that this part of the show goes to press, that may not be over. I don't know. She's also given me a handshake agreement that we're going to do it at our InfoSec campout in August, which stay tuned for details on that. By the time this airs, I may have a little vignette before talking about the tickets going on sale. We had a meeting on the 7th of March to discuss some logistics for that. So be on the lookout for InfoSec Campout 2020. We have a Slack, like we talked about earlier, very active. A lot of folks in there talking about various things. We have CTF Club ran by Mr. Pie, Pinkie Pie in this case. He's got a video on indirect object reference that you can look at. He also does a CTF club on a regular basis. We have a book club. It's going on for the next few weeks on AWS pen testing environments, Pact Publishing book, and that runs for Asia Pacific and EMEA region on Saturday mornings, U.S. time. They also have it on Monday nights for U.S. time if that's something you want to get involved with. Send us a DM on Twitter to the podcast Twitter at Brakesec, BRAKESEC, or you can send an email to bds.podcast@gmail.com and we'll get you an invite. Thanks to all of our Patreon donors. Every dollar you submit to us helps us with hosting fees, helps out with, just time and effort getting a podcast out, paying for domains to make sure that, we don't get hijacked, So every little bit helps. It's just a tip jar. The podcast is always going to be free. So we just thank everybody for adding a little bit to the tip jar every month to help offset some costs for us. We appreciate that. Let me see. TPub store, if you want to get t-shirts, if you want to get, paraphernalia or swag. If you missed InfoSec Campout and you want a t-shirt from last year, I think we still have the design up there on the TPub site. And that will also give us a little kickback as well. If you don't want to give a monthly thing to Patreon, then you can check it out. tpub.com /BDS podcast. I believe it's in the show notes for the complete link to that. You can find us everywhere podcasts are sold or downloaded. We don't have a platform I don't think that we're not on. We're on Pandora, Spotify, Stitcher, pretty much everywhere. And did I miss anything, Mr. Betcher? Anything I forgot?
If you did, I did. So
okay, that's awesome. Oh wait, one last thing. Hold on. Let's make sure the chat is a. Oh, okay. Thanks, April. I'll check that out later on. All right, so I think that was it for Breaking Down Security this week. I'd like to thank Nathan, April, and Jared for coming. Appreciate everybody for coming on. I do not envy your jobs. Compared to mine, it's a piece of freaking cake. So I have much respect for all of you for dealing with arguably some of the most important networks out there, such as it is. And thank you all for coming on the show.
Thanks, Brian.
Thanks, Brian.
No problem.
Thanks much.
No problem. All right, that's it for Breaking Down Security this week. Have a great week, healthy week, if you will. Be kind to one another. Take care of yourselves because you're the only you have. And we'll talk to you again soon.
bye-bye.